Hello, and welcome to the Week 12 Power Grid. We're going to be covering the main slate on this show. If you missed our special Thanksgiving mini episode, be sure to go check that out if it's still before Thanksgiving. And I've got a question for you. Is it time to go bargain hunting for quarterbacks? Maybe. There's a couple of quarterbacks we're going to bring up who are in interesting, cheap situations. We'll get the guys' take on whether you should be looking at those guys for GPPs. But first, we're going to kick over to Vegas and ask John Lee what the Vegas lines are telling us for Week 12.
Vegas value chart this week was really intriguing. As I was making it out, seeing a lot of teams with high implied team totals. New England, Atlanta, Philadelphia, the Rams, all of these teams, 28 points or more. I believe this could be the highest scoring week of the season with regards to what Vegas is projecting. So some really intriguing games. The thing that kind of stands out to me this week, we're always looking for running back situations that are favorable when they're home favorites. So you've got a number of teams this week that are home favorites almost by double digits, at least a touchdown. Those teams include New England, 16.5-point favorites over Miami, Atlanta over Tampa Bay, Philly over Chicago, Pittsburgh against Green Bay, Kansas City against Buffalo, and heck, if you want to drop down a little bit, you even got Cincinnati against Cleveland, and the Monday night game if you're so inclined. These are all amazing situation for running backs. The issue is, I think of all of them, the only one that really intrigues me is Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell against Green Bay, we know he's going to get a lot of action. Outside of that, you've got New England, and we saw last week what happened there. Everybody and their mother was on Rex Burkhead, and he didn't pay off at $3,600. You have Atlanta. We don't know what's going on there with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, although I'm sure we're going to go into that. And then Philadelphia. We all thought that Jay Ajayi was going to be the inherited first running back role there, and lo and behold, LeGarrette Blount was the guy. So a lot of interesting things here at the running back position with these Vegas lines that I think we'll definitely dive into a bit deeper in a few minutes.
Yeah, Jeff, you flashed the red black-eyed Joe during the early part of Jeff's talk there. What were you thinking there?
I think Vegas is lying to us this week. I think it's a total trap. I think that all these teams that are implied to big points, yes, but I think it's going to be garbage time. I think these games are going to be blowouts. So I'm not looking at Atlanta or Philly. I'm looking at two games. I think everybody's going to be looking at the Rams and the Saints because there's going to be lots of points there. I'll get to the running backs. I kind of disagree with some of John's takes on the running backs. For example, like Gurley this week. But I think the game that it looks to be low scoring according to Vegas, I completely disagree with, which is Tennessee and Indianapolis. I love the game. I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game. So I think there's a lot of traps if you just purely look at the Vegas numbers this week.
Yeah, and we'll try to help you navigate which of those games could go the other way so that you can find low ownership, especially for GPPs. Devin, let's move on to quarterbacks. Tell me a little bit about who you like. But first, actually, let me mention a couple of situations here. Paxton Lynch is going to be starting for the Broncos, and Jay Cutler has a concussion. So we might see Matt Moore starting for the Miami Dolphins. It sounds unlikely that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to start for the Niners, but that's still iffy as we're recording on Tuesday night. So keep an eye on that one as well. Devin, tell me, do you like any of this sort of dumpster diving quarterback action, or you got some other guys in mind?
I don't hate Paxton Lynch. This Oakland team, as far as I know, still doesn't have an interception this year. And they've given up their 10th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Paxton Lynch can't be any worse than Brock Osweiler or Trevor Siemian, and that's like not saying much. But I think as a dart play, I mean, he has mobility. He has the ability to run. He's not super quick, but in college he ran for touchdowns. So he's a guy who not a lot of people are going to be on because that situation's horrible. But he's in a spot where he has two good receivers. But that's a dark GPP play. The guy that I'm looking at this week, just like we did last week, you could make the case for Russell Wilson, and someone is going to, and I fully support that. But for me, it's Tom Brady. So Brady just almost every week is a top end play. The Dolphins are allowing the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks. They're also allowing 2.4 touchdowns per game. So this is a really good spot for Brady to continue his hot streak that he had last week.
And the Patriots are one of those teams where having a high favor, margin of 16 points doesn't scare me off of the passing game. They still pass even when they're heavy favorites. Ryan, tell me about some quarterbacks that you like.
I'm a little disappointed Devin took the cheap quarterback torch from me, but I was going to say Paxton Lynch also. Again,
we're agreeing on something?
My gosh.
Stop the presses, stop the show. We kind of agreed on Blaine Gabbert last week too, which
didn't really work. He had 2 touchdowns.
It worked out very well. He was like a top 10 quarterback, right?
It worked out well.
Better than Peterman.
Yeah. Nobody talked about Peterman in any positive light. But reeling things back in here. I also kind of like Matt Ryan a little bit. I think not for cash because the other guys we mentioned here are better, but he faces a Tampa Bay team that is just awful against the pass as well. He had a nice game against, granted, an injured Seattle secondary, but he still has Julio Jones at his disposal. He still has multiple tight ends. He still has playmakers out of the backfield. So anybody going against Tampa has my attention, and Matt Ryan is worth it.
Jeff, you flashed up the red black-eyed Joe. Whenever Paxton Lynch is mentioned, you hate him. Why?
It's not so much him as it is the concept of going cheap at quarterback. As we saw last week with the Peterman fiasco, no position can go more negative than a quarterback. And no position has a higher floor in general a point per dollar on average production than quarterbacks. So I think you're much better off going up at least mid-grade, and I'm going to go higher with Russell Wilson, who's the entire offense for Seattle.
Let's go to John first. He hasn't spoken up on quarterbacks. Both John and Ryan flashed up red black-eyed Joes to things that Jeff was saying. What do you got, John?
Well, I mean, I disagree with the take that quarterback is not the position that you go cheap on. I think that if you're going to go cheap at any position, it's quarterback, because even the worst quarterbacks in the entire league are going to throw the ball or touch the ball 35 times in a game. That in and of itself lowers volatility. Last week, you can use the Nate Peterman example, and I'm not going to disagree with it, because I think I went very vocal saying that I thought it was an idiotic decision on various shows as well as on Twitter. I thought McDermott pulled the plug on Tyrod too early. But this is a situation. He's $4,400, and he's going up against the worst-ranked secondary in the league that, as of Tuesday night, still have 2 starting cornerbacks that are not practicing. And we saw last week Tom Brady's obviously not a good comparison, but we saw kind of what can happen. The guy's $4,400 on DraftKings. If you want to get some of these higher priced guys in other positions, he's entirely in play. I don't know that I love the call this early in the week. If I can get a guy like Brady into my lineups comfortably without the opportunity cost being too high, then I'm certainly going to do that. But I don't think that Paxton Lynch is out of the question, especially because he's got 2 receivers who are great with yards after the catch.
I'm not going to say he's completely out of play. I'm just saying in general, I'm opposed to cheap quarterbacks who are inexperienced. Lynch has some experience. I'll give you that. He's got good receivers. I'll give you that. It is a good situation. I will give you all that. Obviously, we're not talking about cash. I would not go in this route in cash.
Just real quick, before we lose any more listeners, we did not recommend to play Peterman last week. Just want to be clear there. We've talked about cheap quarterbacks. We did not say to play him. Last week it was Blaine Gabbert. The week before I was on an island with CJ Beathard. Nope, no Nate Peterman. Secondly, if we don't want to compare Paxton Lynch to Tom Brady, but Jay Cutler went 34 of 42 for 311 and 3 against this team. I caught on Twitter this week. Let me find it. Scott Barrett from Pro Football Focus. The top quarterback rating seasons of all time: Aaron Rodgers 2011, Peyton Manning 2004, Tom Brady 2007, Matt Ryan last year, Peyton Manning 2013, and number 6 on that list is any quarterback facing this year's Oakland defense. They're not good. They can't stop anybody. So yeah, Jeff, it's not a cash play, but if you want some money to jam some guys in there in a GPP, you could do worse than Lynch this week.
Yeah, just make sure if you're going with a cheap quarterback, don't pick one that's going to throw as many passes to the other team as to his teammates.
13 rushing touchdowns at Memphis is last year.
Yeah. So, just get that extra rushing kick in. It will help at that low of a salary. Let's move on to running backs. Devin, I want to hear about the running backs you like this week. The one injury note I have on here for the main slate is Mike Davis of Seattle. Looks like he's not going to play in this game. He's got a groin injury. Maybe that helps someone like J.D. McKissick. Devin, give me your running back picks.
So this week is a little bit of a mystery. So two of the guys who are in the best situations are Kareem Hunt and Leonard Fournette. So Kareem Hunt's in another great matchup. We saw it last week, and he bit us. I mean, he hasn't scored a touchdown in 7 weeks, but Buffalo is averaging 145 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns per game over the last 5 weeks. I don't know where to go on Kareem Hunt. I mean, I want to get you guys' thoughts on matchup or recent trend of the player. Even though he's looked good, he's just not touching the ball enough, particularly in the red zone. Let's
see the black-eyed Joes here. Who trusts Hunt this week? I am going to jump back on that train. We've got green black-eyed Joes from everybody. So I think you got to trust him. This matchup is so weak sauce. The Buffalo defense has been giving up a crap ton of points. Jeff, you're nodding your head. Tell me about running backs.
We just talked about a whole situation where we like Paxton Lynch, and you guys convinced me that Paxton Lynch is a solid play against Oakland. Now we get the same recipe.
The difference is that Hunt is $8,000 and his price hasn't really come down because of his production. That's the only worry I have about him. And there's other guys in that range that are also in good spots, which we'll let someone else mention. Sure. But Lynch is more of a value to me where it's, yes, he's in a good spot, but we don't really know the player. The only reservation I have about Hunt is he the guy that we saw in the first 3 weeks, or is he the guy that we've seen in the last 7 weeks?
Right. And that's part of the risk you're taking with that, but I like that matchup too much to ignore him. Ryan, who do you got at running back?
Yeah, apologies for the contingency planning here, but as everybody knows, we're recording a little early this week. But if Devontae Freeman can't go, I think we have to go back to Tevin Coleman. He wasn't very efficient, but it was against the good Seattle front and good Seattle linebacking core. So outside of that, I also I like Christian McCaffrey. I mean, we still have a Carolina team who's going to throw the ball to him a ton. They're playing the Jets, who aren't a very good offense. And for some reason in DFS circles, I guess just because of this week after week analysis we do, people forget about the team that was on a bye last week. It's like Carolina hasn't played in over a month. So particularly in GPPs, I like McCaffrey and his upside and the volume he gets.
John flashed the red and green black-eyed Joes, which is the signal on the show for I want to talk next. What do you got, John?
I actually just want to talk as a group about this Christian McCaffrey thing. I mean, I was looking at our projections on Footballguys interactive value charts, and I was really surprised to see Christian McCaffrey coming up this high. And I'm wondering, I do projections for baseball. I don't do them for football because they're so readily available everywhere, and they're generally pretty good. I would put ours near the top of the list. But I'm actually really surprised that Christian McCaffrey ranks as high as he does in a week that we're expecting Greg Olson to come back. Are you guys how are you seeing this? I looked to see if Jonathan Stewart was injured and I didn't know about it, but he's not. He's still getting plenty of looks out of the backfield in terms of carries. I know that Christian McCaffrey is a kind of a dual role player and he lines up out of the slot and so forth. But am I crazy for thinking that our projections were a bit too high? How do you guys feel about it?
You're not crazy.
Okay.
I think they're too high. I think that, look at 6,900 on DraftKings. What does he need to hit value, right? So he needs 2x, 3x, whatever your number is. So he needs somewhere between 15 and 21 points. The problem is, let's say he has 6 catches. He's only averaging 7.6 yards per catch. Yep. That's 45 yards. That's not enough.
That was my feeling as well. I'm glad I'm not on an island there. Especially when Greg Olson's coming back. We all know that there's nobody more excited in the NFL this week than Cam Newton because he gets his favorite receiver back. I just think that Christian McCaffrey could be very dangerous. I kind of hope he's going to be highly owned. I'm not afraid of fading him this week at the running back position.
Yeah, those are fair concerns, especially after he only got 8 touches last week against Miami. Anybody have any other running backs that they want to mention before we move on to wide
Yeah, Leonard
receivers?
Fournette.
Yeah, talk about him.
So Arizona's allowed the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs over the last 5 weeks. Fournette's a guy who I can't figure out. So he ran for over 100 yards against Cleveland, but then in some prime matchups, he's faltered. He's a guy that I think I'm going back to. I think that, he didn't play. It was a couple weeks ago where he was one of the top plays of the week, but he hadn't played in a month. I think he finally has his legs back under him. He's in a warm environment, so he doesn't have to worry about being in the cold, even though he had one of his best games of the year in the cold. So Fournette's a guy. I just wanted to mention one more real quick. Fade Alvin Kamara this week, and I'm sure I'm going to see some red, black-eyed Joes for that one. But this defense that they're facing has basically – the Rams have basically stopped the pass-catching running backs. So they're the 5th lowest in terms of pass-catching receivers from the running back position in football. So they have some lateral quickness on the outside, and that has me a little bit worried.
Yeah, that's a good observation. It's interesting. This is going to be one of the few times New Orleans is not favored. And so, John and I were commenting at the draft party this past weekend. They just kept running even when they were down against Washington. It was very odd. So I think Melvin –
Until the 4th quarter where Breeze threw 172 yards. But
right, exactly. It wasn't until the last second. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was almost like they're like, yeah, we could throw if we want to, but we're not worried yet, They've
been doing that for 4 weeks, it seems like. We can throw if we want to, but we don't.
Mark Ingram had 1 carry in the 4th quarter.
Yeah. So if you think that New Orleans is going to get down by more than 1 score, then I think you avoid Ingram here. But I still like Ingram even in a situation where they're not favored just because of the way they're playing. Yeah. Let's move on to wide receivers. We got a few injury things we're looking at here, keeping an eye on. Robert Woods is going to be out this week with a shoulder injury, so we might want to look at those Rams pass catchers. And also, it looks like New Orleans cornerback Marshawn Lattimore may not go this week. He's got an ankle injury, so that also helps out that passing attack. We're keeping an eye on Allen Hurns a little bit. Ankle injury, didn't play this past week. We got Juju Smith-Schuster. Sounds like he's going to go, and it's not going to be a problem, but just keep an eye on his hamstring issue. Ryan, talk to me about the receivers you like this week.
Yeah, it's a little tougher. I've started at running back and have gone a little deeper into that, but I like Doug Baldwin a lot. The Seattle gets a San Francisco team who is terrible at all 3 corner spots. Doug Baldwin plays all over the field, so it almost doesn't matter who he draws in this matchup. And, the guys have done a good job in the Russell Wilson analysis talking about how he's their whole offense. So as an extension of that, the passing game is Baldwin's had a couple of quiet weeks, except for the late touchdown Monday night. But against San Fran and these bad corners, I would expect him to get double-digit targets and be pretty productive.
Yeah, I think that's a good matchup for him. Jeff, who do you like at receiver?
I think you start and catch from Michael Thomas in that matchup. I think that he's definitely in play. And I think also Julio's up there too. Thanks, Devin.
Devin's flashing the red, black guy Joe vehemently against Michael Thomas on both of them. Okay, we'll let Jeff finish, and then we'll go to Devin next on receivers.
Well, the other guys I like looking for value. I like Cooper Kupp because of Robert Woods being out, and I also think D.D. Westbrook is definitely in play this week against Arizona. He's going to get a really favorable matchup. He's a nice cheap option.
Yeah, and Westbrook ended up playing almost as many snaps as Cole this past week. He seemed to be the better option there out of the two, so he'll probably see an increased role this next week. Devin, tell me why you don't like Jeff's picks ever.
1, because his internet connection goes out. 2, Michael Thomas has 6 red zone targets this season. So we keep talking about Michael Thomas having a regression and scoring touchdowns. He only has 6 red zone targets, and he doesn't have a catch over 32 yards this season. That's not a good strategy to score touchdowns. So you either need deep speed, which Thomas doesn't have. He's more of a big possession receiver. Or you need to be involved in the red zone, which Thomas isn't either. So to me, Michael Thomas, everyone keeps playing every single week because he scored 9 touchdowns last year. Get it. But he's not the same player because of this running attack that they have in New Orleans.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So you're saying get off the regression train.
He's priced too high for a receiver who has everyone is baking in, he scored a lot of touchdowns last year, they're going to come. But if you look deeper in the stats, unless those red zone targets start adding up, he's not going to score.
Yeah.
He's not that expensive. He's 7,200 on 7,200 and 7,600, and the guy has double-digit targets in 4 of the past 5 weeks. There's
a floor there.
And then he's got an implied team total of 25 points. They're an underdog, so the game script actually sets up for him for once. I think this is an ideal position to play him in cash games. I get what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying about the way the team has evolved, but this week could be different. And I know that we've been saying that a lot, but this week legitimately could be different because it's the first time they've won 6 weeks in a row. Is that right? 6.
More than that, I think.
Seven or eight.
It's 8, I think.
So when you're winning, you don't have to throw the ball, but they're actually going up against a real opponent. They nearly lost last week, and we just talked about it. Like what happened in the last 5 minutes of that game with regards to the passing game. They turned it on, and they were able to do it. I don't think it's a matter of him not being able to do it. It's just they're finding success elsewhere.
Ted Ginn has more red zone catches than Michael Thomas this year.
I don't care about the red zone catches. I care about the volume. The volume, yeah. Ted Ginn.
But on FanDuel, you cannot take the volume. FanDuel, you have to factor in touchdowns for cash games. Like his volume at his price doesn't make sense.
So if you don't like Kamara and if you don't like Thomas, are the Saints getting blown out and just not scoring a lot of points?
On Mark Ingram.
Mark Ingram show. Yeah. I got to agree with Devin. I'm on Devin's side on this one.
On DraftKings, you can make a case. I would also make the case that Brandon Cooks is $100 cheaper and Doug Baldwin is $200 cheaper. But on FanDuel, there is no way I'm playing Michael Thomas.
Not in cash. Definitely not in cash.
On FanDuel.
What?
Number 1 cash game receiver on FanDuel.
Let me look at it.
Don't tell me Julio Jones because he's not in the red zone either this year.
He has 11 targets versus 6, which is more. But
how many touchdowns does he have? If that's the route we're taking.
I mean, at 7,600, I would rather go Mike Evans. I would rather go Brandon Cooks. I'd rather go Doug Baldwin. AJ Green at 8,300 against Cleveland, and all he does is against Cleveland is score touchdowns. He scored 5 of his last 7 games against Cleveland. Those are the guys that I want on FanDuel. If I'm paying up for a number 1 receiver, I don't want 7 for 70. That just doesn't do anything for you.
But yet that gets you the 2x value that you're looking for at his salary.
At 10.5 points?
I think there's a much –
My bad. That's on DraftKings. I'll take that back.
I think there's a much better pivot for both sites, and that's T.Y. Hilton. I
like T.Y.
He's cheaper than him on both sites. He's going against Tennessee, who's horrible, and that's the game I think is going to be a shootout. I think T.Y. Hilton is probably the guy over Michael Thomas, and just there ends your debate.
There's a lot of other good options. I think Devin listed a lot of
T.Y.'s floor is the issue a little bit in cash.
Yeah.
Look, on DraftKings, Thomas is fine. I as a number 1 receiver, I have to have a high chance to score a touchdown, and Thomas doesn't have that on FanDuel.
And that's good context you guys put in there.
Yeah. Ryan, what are you thinking? You got your hand up.
Real quick on Hilton, just because, again, it's Tuesday. Jacoby Brissett is still concussion protocol, so I'm not going anywhere near Scott Tolzien.
Fair point. Yeah, Tolzien might be this week's Peterman.
Let's talk about a salary relief guy, can we?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, because we're naming a lot of high-end receivers here, and one of the things that stuck out to me, when we're at those live events, and Austin can vouch for this, it's really difficult to kind of assess what's going on because there's TVs everywhere and people are screaming and talking and so forth. But one thing that stood out to me when I got back, started looking at the game logs, I'll be watching some film over the next 24, 48 hours. But Corey Coleman, Devin, are we allowed? Is this something that's real? Are we allowed to go with Corey Coleman at 11 targets last week in his first game back? I mean, he's 4,300 this week against Cincinnati. Is it doable?
It's doable.
Oh,
it's doable.
He agreed with the Cleveland pick.
I gave you guys Duke Johnson last week, and
I know you turned over a new leaf. I feel like a cyborg has replaced you or something.
Hold on, they haven't had Coleman for most of the year. He's by far their most talented receiver.
Yeah,
I think it's fine.
He may be their most talented player just about on the whole team.
Duke Johnson, I would argue, but fine.
Yeah, I mean, Coleman's the second receiver to get 80 or more yards against Jacksonville this year, and Antonio Brown was the other.
Wow,
I think that's pretty good company.
Yeah, that's all right.
It was exactly 80, but he's only the second guy to get to 80.
But he did it. All right. Any other receivers before we move on to tight ends, especially cheaper ones or salary?
I think a lot of people are going to be on Cooper Kupp this week because Robert Woods is out. That has me a little bit nervous. But who else are they going to throw to? Are they going to throw to Sammy Watkins? Are they going to throw to Tyler Higbee? Or are they just going to dump it down to Gurley? Like those are the questions that I just don't really know. Kupp is out of the slot, which the Saints have struggled a little bit out of the slot receivers. So he would be a guy that I would look at. And then what about Miami? What about Jake Cutler and the Dolphins receivers going against New England? Is there anybody there that we like? Kenny Stills had a big week last week.
Which one can he be confident about is going to be the guy? That's the problem.
The trick.
Depends on the quarterback situation as well.
Fair.
Right.
It's Kenny Stills if Matt Moore plays.
Yeah. That's where I would go.
True.
Devontae Parker had 4 red zone targets last week.
I mean, if Cutler plays, I'm okay with Jarvis Landry. I think he has touchdowns in 6 out of the past 7 games. I mean, talk about a guy who's done the complete opposite of Michael Thomas. I mean, he's gone from never scoring a touchdown to just being a touchdown hog. So, yeah, I mean, I think it really depends for me. It's the quarterback situation there.
One more quick wide receiver that's kind of cheap. Rashard Matthews, I think, is in a good spot on both sites, and he's relatively cheap. And I think, again, I'm loving that Tennessee-Indy matchup. I think the Indy pass defense is not that good at all.
Jeff's all in on that game. Let's talk about tight ends. John mentioned it earlier. Greg Olson's coming back this week. John, will you be playing Greg Olson on his first game back?
I think he's interesting more so on DK than he is on FanDuel. He's 4,800 on DK. This is a week, though. I mean, I don't know how you get away from Travis Kelce outside of price. I mean, Travis Kelce, 7,300, 7,500 respectively. And he's going up against Buffalo. They just continue, the Chiefs, that is, they continue to pepper him with targets. I mean, what he had 14 targets last week, 9 the week prior, 10 the week before. I mean, that's double what Tyreek Hill, their wide receiver one's getting. With that kind of volume, you just love to see it. And he's, the 27.5 implied team total. I think if you can get him into your lineup, he's the guy that you want. Outside of him, I think, at the lower end, you can look at I hate to sound like you call me John Pasquino here, but Delaney Walker is probably in play at 5K and 5,900 on FanDuel. Those are the guys I'd be looking at initially.
Yeah, so you picked that game too. All right. Ryan, who do you like at tight end? We'll let Jeff recover from John stealing his pick.
The only other one that I had written down was Jared Cook from Oakland against Denver. We know Denver's outside corners on the rails are quite good, and that teams, as a result, funnel a lot of targets towards their tight ends against Denver. Cook has a couple 100-yard games this year already, including a nice performance against Denver that could have been nicer had he not dropped an easy ball earlier this season. So I like Cook. He's the other guy I had written down.
Yeah. Devin, how about you for tight ends?
I'm shocked that my favorite tight end hasn't been mentioned. That's Jimmy Graham. So Jimmy Graham leads the league in red zone targets with 22. The next closest is 17. So people are going to look at San Francisco and say they've been good against tight ends. They've allowed at least a touchdown in their last 4 games. Jason Witten went 4 for 54 and a touchdown. Zach Ertz went 4 for 34 and a touchdown. Jermaine Gresham scored a touchdown, and Evan Ingram scored a touchdown. I think Jimmy Graham's in a terrific spot this week to score a touchdown.
Yeah, that's a good touchdown track record there. Jeff, who do you got at tight end other than Delaney Walker?
Well, I'll go back to that same game and say Jack Doyle, assuming the quarterback's in the game. I think Jack Doyle's in play.
I knew it.
Everybody,
Doyle
them all, load them up. But if it's going to be tight on pricing, especially on DraftKings, I think you can go 2 tight ends again this week. And the 2 cheap guys I'm looking at, we could be seeing a passing of the guard to O.J. Howard in Tampa Bay against Atlanta. He caught, I think, 2 touchdowns last week, Atlanta. At least one.
was called back, right?
Okay.
One he scored and one got called back by
Cameron Brate's not a part of this offense with Fitzpatrick as the quarterback.
Correct. That's the main takeaway there. And speaking of touchdowns called back, Delaney Walker had a touchdown last week that he just dropped. So the other cheap
called back, dropped.
Yeah, he dropped it. Yes, should have had a touchdown. I'll just say it that way. And Tyler Kroft against Cleveland, who also is terrible against tight ends, and he's seeing lots of red zone looks, and he's not dirt cheap. He's $3,900 on DraftKings, so he'll be kind of in between. But if you need some value there in the 4K range, he's not a bad option at all.
Yeah, I think he's overpriced on FanDuel, but worth a look on DraftKings. Any other tight end picks before we move on to Jeff's favorite section? No? Okay. We're going to talk about defenses and kickers. I know John doesn't want to talk about them, and Jeff does. Devin, you got something? Ryan, you got
play
anything?
Jacksonville.
Just play Jacksonville. Jackson against Arizona.
I'll be a maybe, depending on what gets said.
Okay, gotcha. All right, Jeff, you agree with the Jacksonville play, and who else you got?
No, I'm not on Jacksonville. I guess Arizona, okay, I could see that, but I think that they're kind of priced up. The teams I was looking at were New England, who's underrated on defense now. They made a lot of good changes. And Pittsburgh against Green Bay, because Green Bay just can't move the ball, and they just got shut out. Those are the defense I'm looking at. As far as kickers, I think that the guy that I'm looking at, most of them are kind of priced up. Boswell for Pittsburgh, not bad. I like Tavecchio, 4,700 for Oakland.
Yeah. Ryan, did you want to add anything to defenses and kickers here?
Cheap defense, Atlanta. Tons of pressure on the quarterback the last couple of weeks. It didn't result in a lot of sacks on Monday night because Russell Wilson is a magician, but Ryan Fitzpatrick is not.
Nice. Let's talk.
And Bengals just because Deshaun Kaiser is horrible.
There's the anti-Browns Devin I was looking for. Why bet against one Brown when you can bet against the entire offense? All right, let's move on to stacks. John, we haven't heard from you in a little bit here. Who do you like to stack in Week 12 on the main slate?
One that's pretty obvious to me is Matt Ryan and Julio Jones against Tampa Bay. I guess I stole Ryan's stack. I have another one here, but you guys would have really just chastised me because I would have been John Pasquino because it's the only receiver that's not been mentioned in that game thus far. Back to Julio Jones. He just got a pristine matchup against Robert McClain and Brent Grimes on the outside. These guys are rated consistently amongst the bottom of the league in terms of coverage cornerbacks, and they've been absolutely horrendous all season. This is Atlanta's got the second highest implied team total at 29 points. It's a great spot for him to get right, especially if there's still questions in that Atlanta backfield.
Devin, tell me a stack that you like that does not involve a Titan or a Colt.
Okay. I'll go with a little. Let's go narrative street. So. Let's go Alshon Jeffrey he's not coming back to Chicago, but he's facing Chicago. He scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. Carson Wentz has been a little bit off, and they've been running the ball a little bit more frequently. But Chicago's not been great against top-end receivers over the last couple of weeks. So this is a matchup where I think Jeffrey gets peppered once again. And should be in a really good spot going against his former team. Nice.
Jeff, you can name one from that same game if you have to, but if you got another one, that would be awesome.
Yeah, as much as I want to go Paxton Lynch and the wide receivers, I think I'm all over the Tennessee and Indy game for over 60-plus points. I think that's really where I'm going to stack this week.
60-plus points.
34-31.
Wow. Awesome.
Can I give you odds on that?
If it was on Thursday, yes.
60.
All right, Ryan, I gave you some time to recover from John's stealing of your stack. Who do you got as your stack this week?
Well, run the Matt Ryan and Julio back with Mike Evans and just hope for all the touchdowns. But then a couple of lower ones we talked about. I'll stick with Paxton Lynch. And instead of Demaryius Thomas, since he only catches touchdowns from Brock Osweiler, it would seem, we'll go with Emmanuel Sanders and run it back with Jared Cook. The other one that I kind of like, since Arizona is just really bad against non-wide receiver ones, is maybe even Blake Bortles and 165 yards short of 200 D.D. Westbrook. this week. We talked about his talent last week, and so it's, I didn't disagree with the talent last week. I won't disagree with it again. But Bruce Ellington put up big points without a touchdown, but receptions and yards against Arizona last week. And Westbrook is a very talented player as well.
Snap counts were an issue for Westbrook.
I think they're going to shift up a little bit this week.
So he's only on the field for 45% of the plays. I agree that they should come up, and if they do come up, he could be a great play. But that would be the only concern.
Yeah,
I think we'll see him pass Cole in terms of the snap counts this week.
It's a deep dig, but everybody else took the stacks I was going to talk about first.
Nice. I appreciate you digging deep. That's why I saved you for last, because I knew you were capable of it. All right, let's go to parting thoughts. Jeff, give us your words of wisdom for week 12.
Don't be afraid to pivot this week. I think there's some good pivots. We talked about McCaffrey. I think a good, strong pivot there is Carlos Hyde. We didn't even talk about him. I think he's cheaper than McCaffrey. Also, pay attention to the injury reports, and also the guys coming off buys. I think Carolina's going to be under on. I know McCaffrey's going to be popular. He's going to get talked up this week, but Greg Olson's going to get overlooked. And if you can get him into a lineup or a stack, or even just use his ownership is going to be, and his price aren't going to be any lower in the rest of the season than this week.
Yeah, Devin, give us your parting thoughts.
It's very Sigmund Bloom of you. I'll just say, since if you're listening before Thanksgiving, have a happy Thanksgiving. And most of all, we're thankful that you're listening to this show. So that's we've seen a big uptick in following, and without you guys, we wouldn't have it. So thank you to everyone out there.
Yeah, that's a great point. We appreciate you guys following us on Twitter, upvoting our stuff on YouTube, putting your comments on YouTube so we can interact with you guys. We love chatting with you guys on either Twitter or the YouTube feed. John, what are your words of wisdom for this week?
I'm struggling right now. I don't have many words of wisdom. It's unusual for me, right, fellas?
Yes.
The words part, at least.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to go there as well.
Definitely thankful for everybody. We had a great time down at the in Nashville at the draft party this week. Got to hang out with Austin and Joe, and get to meet a lot of people who are constantly reading and taking in our content. And it's always great to get that feedback from everybody. And, so I'll say I'm thankful for that too. And I don't know, if you're going to do a DFS parting thoughts, New England, you can run out Tom Brady naked this week without stacking him and be just fine in GP.
You would like Tom Brady naked.
Whoa. Okay. John always likes to try to appeal to our female audience. Well done. Ryan, top that with your parting thoughts.
I'm going away from football after that. To build on what Devin said, Thanksgiving is my personal favorite holiday. I know it's not everybody's, but I'm a big fan, and I really like Thanksgiving. And I wanted my family and friends I'm very thankful for, but they're going to hear about it all week. So just wanted to take the time right now to say to our fans, thank you for listening, and to you guys, thanks for inviting me on the show this year. To be a regular weekly participant. We have a great time every week. About 10 minutes before and after the show, we talk and we BS, and it's stuff that you guys don't all get to hear, but it's some of the most fun time I have every week. And especially to you, Austin, for putting up with us and editing us and keeping us on track, or else this show would be like 4 hours long. Very thankful for you. So I appreciate it, and hope everybody enjoys their turkey, their family, whatever they're doing this weekend, and let's hope these games are great.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate the kind words. And to show our appreciation to all of you guys, we're making several of our articles free this week over at footballguys.com/DFS. All of our content focusing on the Thanksgiving 3-game slate is free. And then we've got a few other articles on our landing page. You'll notice with Black-Eyed Joe icon next to them. Those are free with just giving us your email for our insider subscription, and we send you like a free email each day with the latest news and sort of our fantasy take on what that news means to your fantasy team. So that's going to do it for our show. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, Jeff Pasquino, and Ryan Hester, I am Austin Lee saying happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out all of our DFS content over at footballguys.com, click on the icon in front of Ryan's face. To subscribe to our Football Guys TV YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click below me now.